Right, delighted to say that Dundalk goalkeeper and PFAI chairman Gary Rogers is with us at 8:25 on this Tuesday morning. Gary, you're very welcome. How are you getting on?
Good, thanks very much for having me.
Not at all. So this week it's fairly important to say at the very least in terms of getting the League of Ireland back up and running. How big a challenge, first off, is this week going to be, or these discussions going to be, and these next few weeks going to be for you?
Well, it's a huge week. I think, the finances were disclosed last week. Well, it's hard to say how clear it has been because the clubs have been very vocal that they still want more clarity on that financial package. It obviously isn't up to scratch in terms of what they were looking for to come back in and play football. So it is going to be a tricky week. Obviously, there's a meeting with UEFA tomorrow, which will outline to the European teams where when they're going to get up and running in terms of Europe. One thing for sure is we know that European football is going to go ahead, and it does seem to be as if it's going to be a one-leg scenario. So how they're going to do that now should be disclosed. Tomorrow is that meeting. But there's huge challenges in our own domestic game to get the whole league back up and running.
You mentioned clarity on the financial package that is required to get the League of Ireland back up and running. How much clarity have you got to this point, and how much more do you need to get?
Well, what they've come out with so far is a 1.7 million package, and 500 of that is government funded, which has been taken from the 800,000 which they had allocated to the men's and women's game. So that's money from the government that they've put into the pot. Also, solidarity money that they're looking to bring forward is 800,000, and then this 4-team tournament that they were planning on playing in July, and which has now been scrapped. There's 2.5 million that was allocated for that. So there's still a shortfall on the 1.7 million. So I don't think they're anywhere near where the clubs thought they would be. So this is obviously a huge hurdle. They have been looking obviously for the 4 teams in Europe to forgo some European money, which doesn't appear to be happening, and you can understand the reasonings for that. But there doesn't seem to be any new money from the FAI put into it. Like, they did forgo the affiliation fees which clubs have to pay in order to enter the league, but that's not exactly money put into the pot. It's money that they've said, well, we're going to allow you not to pay that this year. So that's where the major stumbling hurdle is, and that's just down to finances. There'll obviously be other issues as well in terms of the format of the league and the amount of games they're looking to play. So like what they have outlined at the minute is they're looking at coming back and playing 18 games league, which is 2 rounds, and 5 of them games have already been played. So depending on your situation, in the league table, it's hard to know how happy teams will be coming back to play 13 league games. So it's there's huge issues, not just financial ones.
Money, Gary. You must have mentioned it about 10 times there, and that's what all this comes down to. And a lot of what you're talking about does amount, it feels, to robbing Peter to pay Paul, that it's money that was due to be spread out over the next number of years that's going to be brought forward, probably rightly so considering the crisis we're in, to ensure that there is a league over the next number of years. But the new money angle that hasn't come through, that whether it was streaming or whether it was new broadcast deals or sponsorship deals or UEFA, FIFA money, how frustrating has that been from a player's point of view, and from watching this over the last couple of months and watching the FAI come out with any amount of ideas, but it seems as though none of them have come to fruition so far?
Yeah, it's been hugely frustrating. I think the most frustrating thing is the time frame. Like, we're talking 2 or 3 months now, and there doesn't seem to be any new developments, like you say, whether it be FIFA money or UEFA money or government money. We all know there's certainly no FAI money because of the scenario with the last kind of regime. I know there's kind of 2 debates whether it's old and new regimes here, but the drawing down earlier 4.5 million from UEFA has left the organising body in a serious hole, whereas that money now, if it hadn't been drawn down early, would be there as a contingency fund to get the league up and running. So I thought we're paying the price for the past regime's faults, really, and it's difficult for the likes of Niall and Gary who are coming in there, and they're trying to I suppose pick up the pieces and get the game back on the road, for want of a better word. So there's huge problems and huge frustrations for everyone on all sides of it.
Do you know what some of the new ideas were in terms of generating new money for the FAI?
Yeah, well, you're obviously looking at streaming. The big problem is with TV deals. There's no TV deal in this country. Well, it's not, the clubs are not benefited from it, and all the sponsorship deals previously were all rolled into a confidentiality agreement and rolled in with the senior international team. So clubs had no idea what money the league was generating, and so therefore they were unable to, clubs were unable to take over the league themselves and run it, because effectively you'd be taking over, and you wouldn't know what it has been worth. So it's a bit of a minefield, really. Obviously, the new idea is you're looking at generating a new TV deal, but the TV deal doesn't run out until the end of this year, so they haven't been able to go in and broker a new deal on that. Streaming is obviously another revenue that they've been looking at, and they haven't, I suppose, floated how much the revenue deal will be worth. It certainly would be worth something, but now you're at the stage where all of the European countries are back up and running. If we had been able to get up and running, you could have benefited from being first back, as opposed to we're in the situation now where we're going to be last back. And at the minute, we currently don't have a start date, and we're the only summer league in Europe who doesn't have a start date back. And that's hugely frustrating for the players who are training away at the minute, trying to stay fit and stay focused for a league that they don't know when it's going to start.
Niall, Quinn was saying a few weeks back that he didn't want to talk about other revenue streams being explored because he didn't want to compromise potential deals that were happening. He had mentioned the possibility of streaming, television revenues, things like that. How confident were you that these other revenue streams were close to happening? Because it seems at this juncture now, either those deals that he didn't want to compromise have now either fallen through, or something just hasn't happened with them. Were you confident that there was going to be a solution found that didn't involve streaming or television revenues?
I suppose you're hopeful more than confident. It's hard to, be too confident when, that person or that company who are willing to come in are not willing to put their name to it. I think if you were coming in to save the league, you'd be willing to put your name to it because you're going to benefit from it. So, it was hard to be overly confident, but we're all hopeful, that there is going to be a resolution and we are going to have football, this year, and the sooner the better. Obviously, with European football, coming probably ahead of league action, at least we have that kind of to look forward to. But that's only for 4 clubs. There's 16 or 15 other teams. You've got Shamrock Rovers B, other teams, and groups of players who are hungry to get back playing and eager to get back on the pitch.
Why did they organise that 4-team tournament if they couldn't afford it?
I think it was a pilot tournament just to show that we could get football back up and running, and there's huge testing going on in that now as well. And I'd imagine that testing will probably be dropped now in order to, at the end of this week we'll have up on 1,000 tests done, and so far, all them tests have been negative. So that's a huge positive, if you like. But I don't think the need for testing is as great as it was possibly when that tournament was floated. And it was ideal sort of preparation for teams who would be going into Europe, obviously with no league action, to have as preparation.
Those were a nice few months we had where there was a real air of positivity around the League of Ireland, and we had wonder goals being watched by tens of millions of people, and a real sense of a new era at boardroom level within the FAI and potentially on the pitch with Stephen Kenny coming in. These last few weeks have been a cold, hard dose of reality of where Irish football is, and I'm wondering from a player's point of view and your involvement with the PFAI as to how damaging this whole saga could be, because one of the things that Niall Quinn and his grouping have spoken about a lot is trying to reinvent Irish football for young kids coming through, seeing the League of Ireland as a path, not losing so many players at 15, 16 to England, giving them a viable route and livelihood in this country within football. If you're a player or you're a parent looking at this and there's options in front of you, you're looking at this and thinking Irish football is still a complete basket case.
Yeah, unfortunately, the signs are not good. I'd like to paint a positive picture on it, but it's difficult, and you look at league clubs now have taken on, the underage teams as well. And we've all been talking about how we're going to get, the Premier Division teams and the First Division teams up and running, but you've got all the underage teams and you've got the women's game as well. So there's huge challenges in getting, the elite football up and running. But, at the minute we're losing sight of, everything else that comes with it. So it is difficult, and like I say, and that is down to past errors. Unfortunately, we can't get away from how the organisation was run and governed in the past. And now, when you need that contingency and you need a well-run organisation, that has some money behind it, and now we don't have it when we really need it, and it's hugely frustrating. I think League of Ireland fans and players and people involved in the game would have known about the way the FAI has been run, and it obviously took new turn there last year when Mark Tighe, who did great work along with plenty of people in the media to uncover the failings of our governing body.
As somebody at the top of the PFAI, have you been contacted by players who are concerned about their livelihoods? Because Stephen McGuinness has been on the show saying just how important the wage subsidy scheme is at the moment. There are hopes that it will be extended into September at this point. But beyond that, you really have to be hoping that revenues have to start coming into the league before the subsidy scheme goes out of the league. How big a concern has that been for you and for the players in the League of Ireland?
Yeah, like we have delegates meeting and we have a meet every week. So like all the players in each club feed into their delegate and we meet and bring our concerns to Stephen and Ollie and Simone. So like, there certainly is huge concerns. And I just said the COVID payment, has probably alleviated a lot of concerns for not just for League of Ireland footballers, but for the wider public. It's been, I suppose, the government deserve huge credit for implementing that, and it has helped, I suppose, everyone throughout the country, not just League of Ireland footballers. But like I say, when that does, I suppose, stop, and it will stop, it'll be interesting to see the fallout there, and I can imagine our office will be very busy.
What would the fallout be in the worst case scenario?
Well, look, it's hard to see. Like, if clubs are not back playing and paying wages and the COVID payment is gone, well, then we're going to have huge issues with players, being unable to pay their bills, whether it be mortgages or rents, and like anyone else in any walk of life, footballers have bills to pay and and people to look after. So it's going to be the same fallout for our industry as many other industries.
Is there a situation, are you thinking about the worst case scenario almost, where other work needs to be looked at from a player's standpoint for a little while? Like if things get better in the League of Ireland, it may not happen immediately. It could be a situation where players have to get by for a few months without their actual wage from their football club for a while. Have you considered that and perhaps preparing players for what they might have to do in their personal life to ensure that, as you say, they can pay their mortgage?
Well, to be fair, 75% of our players are not getting paid their full wages as it is. So I think, it's been a real eye-opener for players. We obviously have in place education and courses for lads, to upskill and to give them new skills for life outside of football. And, that's been important, and it's been a message we've hammered home to our members, I suppose, over this pandemic. And it's been one that, we've a player development manager, Emma Burns, and she has been brilliant with lads and available to meet lads in order to give them advice on, their future pathway. Because one thing's for sure in our league is you're not going to earn enough money, to prepare you for the rest of your life. So you're going to have to have a job for after football. And I think the realisation of that may have hit home for many players. And like I say, we do have education grants in place and for players, to prepare themselves for life after football.
Even if the FAI do manage to get the funding together, and at the moment it looks like they might have about 1.3, 1.5 million. The issues and the difficulties don't stop there, because then you're into how you spread that money out between the various different clubs, almost all of whom have taken on a different stance throughout this crisis in terms of paying players. So Dundalk have been in a position where they've been able to continue paying their players, yet Sligo Rovers right from the very off felt they weren't in a position to, and had to temporarily lay off their players. And in between, you have all manner of different ways. And I see Derry City coming out that they're not convinced that the proposed distribution is equitable, that they're one of only 3 clubs who've kept their staff and players on full salary. Do you see that being a potential sticking point if the money is there, if they do get this fund together, as to how they get all the clubs to come on board and agree to come back and to share the wealth?
Look, it's obviously going to be difficult. I think if they can get the money in place, how they divide it, if they have it there to divide it, I think everyone will be looking to get back to playing football, and whatever way that works out, it's going to be different. Some clubs are going to lose out, and you would feel, I suppose, aggrieved if you're one of the teams who have been paying the wages, and then you're offered less money than other teams who haven't been paying the wages, and that's the difficulty that the FAI are going to have in brokering the deal between the clubs. Like, there's huge challenges, in divvying up whatever money they have in order to get football back. But we'll be hopeful that it can be done. I think if there's money there they have to come back with more than what they have initially brought forward, and that's going to be interesting this week. And that you're hoping that a decision will be made by Friday, because this scenario of having 2 or 3 months where there's been plenty of talking going on, but at the minute we're no clearer or closer to to a decision on when we return to football, and finances have been a massive part to play in that.
Have you been given any sense of what the best case scenario is as to if funding is in place, if the clubs come to an agreement as to how it's distributed, as to when you might be back playing football again? What's the earliest start date?
Well, there is no date really. They were talking about the 18th of August, I think it was, and that was a couple of weeks ago. That's when the 4-team July tournament was in. And now that tournament is out, you would like to think they could bring that, forward and start in late July. But, it's you'll run into difficulty then in the time that teams would have to prepare themselves for, a start of season again with friendly matches and stuff like that. Like, lads have been training on their own and remotely doing Zoom sessions and conditioning sessions, but to actually get back on the pitch and play some games, it's going to take a little bit of time. And then you also have the problem is when lads return back to training, clubs having to pay the wages, they're not going to want to pay for 6 weeks when they can try and pay for 4 weeks. When they're back paying wages, they want to be playing football. So that's another issue that you're going to have.
The news this morning and the main story here, just looking at the Irish Independent, is the St. Pat's owner, Gareth Kelleher, who came out last night and said that Gary Owens and Niall Quinn have failed badly in their work over the last few months. What's your view been of how Gary Owens and Niall Quinn have handled this?
I think it's probably not really helpful to throw that in there and throw it at them, because I think they've been thrown into a very difficult situation. I would obviously like their actions to be quicker and not to have the sort of time delay that we have in terms of getting the league. They could have, this financial package that has been unveiled this week probably could have been unveiled a month ago, because there's effectively not a whole lot in it that clubs weren't expecting already. So I think we could have done this earlier in the process, and now we find ourselves probably we've lost more time and we're further down the road with no real, I suppose, benefit from it. So it is difficult for them. It's not an easy situation, but the circumstances that they've been thrown into, as we all know, has been hugely difficult, and it's an uphill task for them. But I do feel that they're certainly, their heart is in the right place and they are trying to move things forward. But we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding when we eventually, hopefully, get this over the line and we see football back up and running. I don't think we can judge them halfway through the negotiation period. I think that statement coming out in the middle of a very important, I suppose, time frame in terms of getting the league up and running, is probably not as helpful as it could be.
How do the top four clubs, how do they feel, in your opinion, about the idea that they were asked to stump up prize cash, essentially, or the European qualification cash to try and float everybody else? Like, it's interesting that you see the St. Pat's chief coming out and kind of, if you wanted to look at it one way, with the request for the top four clubs to stump up a bit of cash, there could have been a bit of friction created there if things weren't on great terms.
I don't think clubs are going to be too happy about it, to be honest with you, because you look at our what our league generates in terms of prize money, and I seen something today where the Scottish Championship team, the bottom team of the Scottish Championship team, earns 175,000 in prize money, and the top team in the Premier Division here will earn 100,000 in prize money. So, it's not as if you're talking about vast amount of money that our clubs generate. And the one carrot that they have is if they qualify for Europe, they have a capacity to generate more income, because they haven't been getting it. And clubs, it changes regularly in our league, as we know. It's very cyclical in terms of who the top teams are and the bottom teams are. It changes very quickly. So, to ask a team that's earned the right to play in Europe and to generate more revenue, to take it off them, like say Bows, who haven't been in Europe for 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 years maybe, and now all of a sudden they're in Europe this year and they've been asked to give 100,000 back to support other clubs. It's a very tough ask, I think. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's a good idea to be looking for clubs to bail out the FAI.
Yeah, everybody's in this together, but there is a line, isn't there, at a point? I'm sure people in Dundalk weren't happy with the request either.
Yeah, I don't think any of it, it hasn't been agreed, so it's fairly obvious that none of the clubs were happy with it,
Yeah, well, it's going to be a very, very interesting few days. Gary, thanks a million for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all, lads.